Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor today to stand in the House and speak to this motion, the very first motion that our new official leader of the opposition put forward. I want to thank him for taking a principled stand on an issue that is dearly important to us in the province of British Columbia and indeed all of Canada. And the motion that we're discussing today reads as follows: is that the House agrees that Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Expansion Project has social license to proceed, is critical to the Canadian economy and the creation of thousands of jobs, is safe and environmentally sound, as recognized and accepted by the National Energy Board. And it is under federal jurisdiction with respect to approval and regulation, and it should be constructed with continued support of federal government, as demonstrated by the Prime Minister personally announcing the approval of this project. What we need, Mr. Speaker, right now is a champion, someone who will stand up for safe transportation of our natural resources. And for the people that rely on the natural resource sector, such as the energy sector, and rely on the natural resource sector and on the energy industry to put food on their table and a roof over their head for their families. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, to no one's surprise, our Prime Minister made the announcement but has been absent on this front, choosing to offer a few platitudes not from Ottawa, Mr. Speaker, or his riding of Papineau, but from Italy. Given that he personally approved this project and said the following: "This is a decision based on rigorous debate, on science and on evidence. We have not been and will not be swayed by political arguments, be they local, regional, or national." Mr. Speaker, you have to forgive us for our cynicism. I'll remind this House that we saw this Prime Minister and his cabinet absolutely and 100% uncategorically swayed and influenced by outside parties with the reversal of the Northern Gateway project. A project, Mr. Speaker, that the economic benefits from it to our First Nations and Métis communities were unprecedented in Canadian history. It was a part for those communities to share in up to 33% of the ownership and control of major Canadian energy infrastructure project. And, Mr. Speaker, the Aboriginal Equity Partners would also receive up to $2 billion in long-term economic, business, and education opportunities for their communities. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason why we're here today, is that we've seen a lot of talk, but we haven't seen the Prime Minister defend it in the province. We haven't seen his 17 MPs defend it in the province of British Columbia. And I would hazard this, Mr. Speaker: the reason why we are sitting today on the verge of provincial collapse, possibly, with the coalition of the BC NDP and the Green Party, is because the Prime Minister himself and the 17 BC MPs have refused to come to the province, refused to stand up for these projects that are the lifeblood of our economy. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to this debate intently over this morning. I've yet to hear one BC MP, BC Liberal MP, stand up in support of this project. We've heard great testimony from members from the Liberal side talking about the benefits to their communities on the East Coast, but yet we have yet to hear one BC MP stand up in this House today and stand up in support of the Kinder Morgan project. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic benefits of this project. I think a lot of the facts have already been said, but I also want to tie it to really what it means to those communities like my communities in Cariboo, Prince George. But I'm going to first go back to this. The benefits of the Kinder Morgan project will provide Canadians incredible economic impact or economic benefits. The National Energy Board released its report on Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline Twinning Project on May 19, 2016. After thorough review of the board approved the pipeline, concluding that, subject to 157 conditions, the pipeline was not likely to cause significant adverse environmental effects, and that the construction of the pipeline was in the best the best interest of the public of Canadians. I'll repeat that one more time. It was in the best interest of Canadians. Kinder Morgan was approved after rigorous, independent, scientific review process. It will create 15,000 well-paying jobs, well-paying, high-quality jobs for Canadians. More than $300 million has already been committed to Indigenous groups by the proponent under mutual benefit and capacity agreements. Over 40 letters of support from First Nations communities along the pipeline have been given to the proponent, and this government knows that, Mr. Speaker. Shovel-ready pipeline projects can see people gainfully employed for 2 to 3 years during the project's construction phase. And finally, Mr. Speaker, since it's FCM week on the Hill and many of our colleagues are actually touring around our mayors and our councillors and our directors from regional districts, I want to make this very clear. Municipalities across Canada receive more than $600 million in property taxes each year from pipeline companies. Those sound like some pretty good benefits, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Prime Minister has made this case for the pipeline in Calgary, which is, I would say, probably a pretty willing and supportive audience. In Rome, which, what are they going to do? They're going to support it. But his BC caucus has been afraid to have him discuss it in the province of British Columbia. He's refused to come and actually speak to the merits and the benefits of it in the province. And Mr. Speaker, it's interesting too. He'll come to the province when he's standing beside third parties, when he's making an announcement of a tanker moratorium or the Ocean Pacific protection plan.
Right.
When he's doing things that are going to, I guess, unfairly in many ways, unfairly because we're not seeing it on the East Coast, he'll stand beside these third parties and proudly make that announcement of those measures, but he won't stand up when we're talking about something that impacts so drastically our economy of the province and indeed our country. Mr. Speaker, in these times of economic uncertainty, it's imperative that we recognize the importance of our energy and our resource sector, something this government seemingly has failed to do. I hate to be the one to break it to the Prime Minister, but that is part of his responsibilities, Mr. Speaker. It is outlined in his job. He is to be the champion of our resource development, of our energy sector, of our softwood lumber industry, our forestry industry. And I'm calling, I suggest it is now up to Justin Trudeau to walk the talk, stand up for his BC Liberal MPs, and champion the pipeline.
Order. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
I apologize for interrupting, but I'm sure the honourable member intended to say Prime Minister and not his proper name.
I thank the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands for her intervention. In fact, she's right. In fact, we had one of these just in the last hour, as a matter of fact. So these things do happen, and I'm sure the honourable member for Caribou Prince George will prevent that kind of thing from happening for the remainder of his comments. The honourable member.
Colleague is listening so intently to my speech. Mr. Speaker, it is now up to the Prime Minister to walk the talk, stand up to his BC Liberal MPs, and champion the pipeline in BC to ensure that it actually gets built. Because it isn't a single region that will benefit from this project, it is all of Canada. When we create jobs, the benefits are felt by all, from the mom and pop grocery stores to the gas stations where people fuel up in the morning. I think sometimes politicians forget to include this in their vision when they're talking about resources, be it softwood lumber or the creation of future pipelines. I know that in my riding, we're going to face hundreds, if not thousands, of job losses as a result of this government's failure to secure a new softwood lumber agreement. When the energy sector took a hit the last few years, it was a very difficult time for my constituents and indeed all across Canada. We all had acquaintances, friends, or loved ones who had been impacted negatively or lost a job. Even our airlines took a hit with direct flights canceled between Calgary, Prince George Terrace, Brandon, Manitoba, Penticton, Kamloops, Abbotsford. It was a huge hit, Mr. Speaker, given that a daily round trip and domestic service into an airport into a small community roughly the size of Prince George generates $2.5 million in value-added GDP and $5.8 million in economic impact. Mr. Speaker, we're not just talking about a pipeline. We're talking about Canada's economy. We're talking about the government, this Prime Minister and his 17 17 BC MPs standing up for a project that is so vital for not just the province of British Columbia, for all of Canada. Thank you.